evening. Our top story this week. After all the therapists start pondering what is best for the little Cherokee girl who is caught up in a custody battle between her biological father in Oklahoma and the wannabe adoptive parents in South Carolina, and after a Cherokee Nation court grants custody of the little girl to the real father's wife and parents, South Carolina's highest court orders the adoption of the little girl finalized and the father's rights to his daughter terminated, thus denying the real father's request for a hearing on what would be in the child's best interest. So the father makes a last-ditch effort to the U.S. Supreme Court to block the removal of his daughter. The kid's real mother files an injunction against the Indian Child Welfare Act, calling parts of it unconstitutional, and several American Indian groups are planning to sue over the decision. In Florida this week, the federal government is suing the state's child protective industry for warehousing disabled foster kids in nursing homes, but the state says that this is a disruptive lawsuit and is intended to take over control and operation of Florida's Medicaid and disability programs. A week after Florida's DCF boss quits over a rising scandal due to a sudden rash of child abuse deaths, the new interim director decides to take a look at and change the safety standards used by CPS agents. But then another 2-year-old kid dies while under the watchful eye of Florida's Department of Children and Families. And with this being the 5th child death in the last 2 months, a circuit court judge called for Florida's DCF to stop doing child welfare investigations and transfer that responsibility to some more competent people. In Connecticut, the state's child welfare boss is still working at turning the child protective industry around so that they can end years of federal court-ordered oversight. In Nebraska, the number of foster kids is down 14% since March of 2012 as they start to rely more on family preservation services that help to keep the kids safe in the home. 47 of the nation's attorney generals are calling on Congress to change the wording of the Online Decency Act so that they can address the problem of advertising sex trafficking of children and prostitution on classified advertising sites. In Rhode Island, a judge is not satisfied with the CPS agent's findings that staff at a school for troubled boys followed proper procedure when breaking the arm of a boy who they were physically restraining. Neuroscientists think that they have discovered how to implant false memories in the brain. And yes, there's an app for that, because in Kansas City, Missouri, a pediatrician develops an iPad app to help cops and CPS agents who otherwise wouldn't have a clue to detect child abuse. In Poland this week, illegal adoptions are on the rise, with birth mothers selling their babies and claiming that the buyers' husbands are the biological fathers and handing over custody to them without having to go through an adoption agency. In New Zealand, the Health Information and Quality Authority have published a report regarding their concerns about the failures of the child protective industry. In Ireland, it is found that CPS agents aren't doing the proper background checks as kids are being placed with foster parents who have allegations hanging over their heads. And Irish kids who have been ratted out to the child protective industry are waiting a year or more to even be assigned a social worker. In Scotland, homeschooling parents are asking for help in fighting a new law that would assign a social worker to every child from the day they are born. And in Singapore, a stepfather adopts a boy against the wishes of the real father. In Canada, a public inquiry into the death of a little girl named Phoenix Sinclair is told that Manitoba's child welfare system has improved since she was killed. The girl's former foster mother is filled with hope and renewal as she believes that this to be a serious wake-up call for the agency to fix a lot of their problems. And the first step towards a solution is admitting that there is a problem, which the agency finally does when they finally admit that they fucked up in that case and starts taking responsibility for the girl's death. In Australia, experts are calling for a spanking ban after finding that spanking supposedly increases the risk of mental health problems later in life. And the Department of Children's Services has been dealing with problems for half a century that they still haven't figured out. In England, the mother of baby P, who died back in 2008 in one of England's worst ever child abuse cases, applies for parole after serving the minimum 5 years of her indefinite sentence, and her own mother is hoping that she is never released from prison. Cuts to legal aid are starting to affect the poorest citizens of the UK, who now can't get divorced to fight for their kids who have been snatched by social workers with the help of a lawyer. And a British foster mother is worried about losing her respite care service amid another round of budget cuts. In Alaska, state foster care records shows a history of allegations against a pedophile foster parent who is now charged with sexually abusing 2 children. In Minnesota, a woman's foster care license is revoked after her biological son rapes a foster kid who is in the home. In New Mexico, police arrest an ex-coach and foster parent for molesting at least 3 females beginning in 1979. And in Oregon, a foster mother who slapped a 4-year-old so hard that it left finger imprints gets 3 days in jail. In Washington, an American couple pleads guilty to abusing their adopted Russian kid, and the Russian government is quite upset that they only got a suspended sentence in the case. In Texas, a 13-year-old runs away from her foster home and then ends up up getting gang raped by as many as 10 men, some of whom videotaped the assault. And Donald Ray Lewis here is the third guy to get arrested in that case. In Iowa, a report is showing a rise in abuse investigations at a juvenile detention facility. In New York, a 72-year-old is told that she is too old to adopt her foster daughter, so a judge rules that the kid must be moved to another home within the next 2 weeks. In Michigan, Governor Rick Snyder tells a lesbian couple and their 3 kids that they are not a family. And finally, tonight, in Illinois, a child welfare supervisor is claiming that the nonprofit agency that she worked for fired her for getting pregnant. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.